the beginning of this semester, the first weekend, I wanted to go out and meet some new people, so I re-downloaded Tinder. I matched with a dude and he took me to see Creed 2. Usually with first dates, I don't give people my apartment number for safety reasons, so I just have him pick me up in the lobby of my complex. But this guy insisted on picking me up at my door, which was red flag number 1. We get to the movie theater though, and he isn't talking at all, and I have to ask all the questions. He gives a weird, short kind of one-word answers, and I try to stay lighthearted because I figured maybe he was just nervous, but he asks me where I'm from like 6 times, and clearly he just isn't paying attention to anything that I'm saying, which was red flag number 2. We get into the theater though, and immediately he's just all over me, weirdly trying to give me a shoulder massage, which I ask him to stop as I'm really uncomfortable at this point. He then grabs my hand and holds it at an uncomfortably sharp angle to the point where my hand fell asleep. I was too uncomfortable to pull it away, and he also kept putting his arm around me and forcing me to sort of hunch over. I desperately wanted to watch this movie. Rocky is one of my all-time favorites, so I just tried to get through it. Throughout the movie, he kept awkwardly force laughing at the funny parts and hugged me closer, and I would turn away, which was red flag number 3. He would also stare at me very obviously as if he wanted to make out, which I did not want to make out with him. I sat the entire time with my legs crossed and my hand up to my mouth in a thinking face so he didn't try to kiss me. After the movie ends, he's still being freaky silent, so I go on my phone for the short car ride home because I'm so done with this uncomfortable date. As we're pulling into my complex, I just get an overwhelming feeling that I should not let him walk me to my door. We get to my complex and I've unbuckled before the car has even stopped, and I quickly say thanks and I hop out, and he asks, "Are you sure you don't want me to walk you to your door?" And I say, "No, thank you," with a fake smile, and I just speed walk into the building. I watch inside the building as he sits there for a few minutes before finally pulling out. When I get to my apartment, none of my roommates are home, but I instantly delete him off of Snapchat. And the next day, he messages me on Tinder saying, "Why did you delete me on Snap?" So I just unmatch him at this point. So I think nothing of it for nearly 2 months, and tonight I go on a second date with a guy to a theatre that I hadn't been back to since that awful date. As we get home, he asks me if I saw on Facebook about the student that got arrested for raping several minors. He says that the guy was in one of his classes, and I'm pretty shocked. So I ask to see the article, and my heart literally sank, and I dropped my date's phone. It was him. I felt so sick that I immediately clutched my stomach, and I just said goodbye to my date, and I texted a bunch of people. Turns out that one of my roommates was pursued over Facebook by him aggressively as well, though she refused to go out with him. And one of my best friend's roommate's girlfriend's friends were also harassed by him. After my date left, I threw up my dinner, and I've never felt just so disgusted that I interacted with someone so evil. I am so grateful too that I had the feeling to get out of his car when I did. Knowing now that my roommates weren't home, I can't even imagine what would have happened if he walked me to my door. He's currently in jail, but he could be out on bond if he posts bail. I'm so disgusted and sorry for the girls that he hurt, and I'm so grateful that I wasn't one of them. And if you're wondering, yes, I deleted Tinder. I've had a long history of paranormal stuff happening to me, but this one takes the cake. So I lived in the middle of Hicktown swamps in Georgia when these took place. When I was 13, I ran away from home for personal reasons. I booked it to a local nature trail in the middle of a wildlife reserve, and I ran down it. In about 15 minutes, a hand reached out from the bush to my right and hit me in the chest. I got back up and looked for my attacker, but there was nothing there, so I proceeded to run home just crying like a real man. Now, when I was 15, I was laying in bed scrolling through creepypasta articles when I hear a sort of a rhythmic tapping on my window. I freak the heck out and pretend that I can't hear it for a while until I just can't stand it anymore, and I pull the curtain back and it's only a raccoon. I hit the window and scare him off, and I just try to calm myself down. About a half an hour later, and the same tapping and same rhythm and same pattern. It kind of went like a click click and then a scratch, and so I decided that I'm going to shoot this raccoon with a BB gun so he won't come back, and I grab my BB gun, open the window, take aim, and there's a shadowy figure vaguely resembling a man staring right at me, right on the border of my lawn that connects my yard to the huge expanse of woods around my house. And it just stares at me and slowly walks into the woods behind it. And after that, I didn't sleep much for about a week. During fall last year, on a walk down the nature trail with two of my friends, Anton and Justin, at like 4 a.m. because we wanted to do an early morning hike. We were cracking jokes and having a great time, and on the walk back home, I just feel this awful presence. I look behind me and I see something at the end of the trail in the distance. My vision isn't the best, but from what I could tell, it kind of looked like a man with a deer's head. So I looked away, told my friends not to say a word until we get home, and Justin knew of my past occurrences, and he doesn't really mess with the paranormal stuff, so he listened and we just kept walking. But Anton just looked at me for like 15 minutes while walking perfectly straight. I freaked out when I started doing some strange movements with my arms, and he was mimicking them, and every time I did it, he would do the same thing. At one point, I locked both my arms and put them on my head, and he did the exact same thing. It got so creepy, in fact, that I was ready to just leave him in the woods that night, honestly. Eventually, after doing this for quite some time, he just randomly screamed something completely unintelligible, and it honestly scared the life out of me, so I threw a punch at him and he dodged it. I apologized, told him to shut up, and told them all to just run home with me. But when we got there, we discussed what we saw and what happened, and Anton said he just completely blacked out as soon as we started walking the nature trail, only to wake up to me throwing a punch at him. That morning was really weird. So, about 2 months ago, this is where I drew the line. I've moved since the incident, and I honestly don't plan on going back there ever. But I was walking down the nature trail again. Clearly I hadn't learned my lesson. Just listening to music and having a good time, and this thick, like, permeable smell of blood just hits my nose, and I genuinely thought that I had a nosebleed for a second until, through my headphones, I hear someone talking. I take off one of my headphones and I have a look around, and there's nothing. Speed walking the heck out of there, it happens again, and this time it sounds exactly like a man screaming, Warbringer. I'm on the verge of tears at this point, and I jerk back, look around as fast as possible, and I see it. There's a fully naked man, resembling more of a corpse than a man, with a bleeding and rotting horse head. His arms were extended outward to me, and at that point, I just ran. Now, obviously by this point, I have a few theories of my own as to what happened, but I don't like indulging in them because, well, people give me a lot of flack for it. Whatever happened down on that trail, it all scared the heck out of me. My current idea is that, honestly, I hallucinated some of it, and maybe I've just gone a little bit crazy or something. I'm really not sure, but whatever the case is, if there's anyone on here who has any explanation as to what any of this is, I'm very open to it. So I was about 16 at the time, and I rode to the public bus to and from school. This particular day, I had done some special effects makeup before the end of my classes, so I had fake blood running down my face, and I couldn't be bothered to take it off before leaving school. Now, I knew as I was boarding my bus, people would stare or ask questions, so I wasn't surprised when this man, who looked to be in his mid-30s, started asking about the makeup. The conversation was normal at first, just the usual, "Oh wow, did you do that yourself?" kind of stuff, and I answered the questions as I normally would, and expected the conversation to be done with and over at this point. But boy, was I wrong. This man, he mentioned his name was Joe, started steering the conversation into really strange territory, asking me if I had a boyfriend, to which I lied and I said I did. He then proceeded to ask if my boyfriend liked the makeup and if I was on my way to see him now, and I again lied and said that he likes the makeup and yes, I'm going to see him, trying to get Joe to believe someone was expecting me. The conversation died down for a bit until he said, "You know, you remind me a lot of my sister." And he said it with a grin, and I just smiled in response, not really knowing what to say. After not hearing anything from me, Joe continued, "My sister was kind of annoying, and she was always lying about me to my parents, and I had fantasies about breaking her jaw." Now, at this point, I was terrified. My bus stop was still another 20 minutes away, and I just wanted to be out of that situation. Seeing that what he said made me really uncomfortable, he switched the subject, telling me about where he worked and what he does there. I just nodded along to what he was saying, remaining silent the entire time. Closer to my bus stop, he says to me, "Well, why don't you come to my house? I have a freezer full of pizza and ice cream. Maybe we can hang out for a while," to which I politely declined, saying my boyfriend was expecting me. Finally, I get to my bus stop and quickly get off the bus, speed walking all the way home, all the while calling a friend to inform them of what happened. But things were fine for a bit after that, and I switched my bus route so I wouldn't run into him again, but one afternoon, I had to go to the store that was on my old route, and I was nervous about getting on that bus again, but was happy when I didn't see Joe. I did my shopping, and as I was leaving the store, I saw Joe standing out by the doors, staring at me. The second I was out of the doors, he walked over to me, a grin on his face, and wrapped his arms around me. I pulled away from him, telling him that I was really busy and I had to go. He then asked, "Well, what are you doing? I have time, I can tag along." I was very persistent, saying I really couldn't. I had to go, and I walked away, heading into a neighboring store that I knew would be busy. But sure enough, Joe followed. I ignored him as I made my way down a heavily populated makeup aisle, keeping my attention on some cheap lipsticks in the hopes that he'd just get the hint and leave me alone. I was wrong. Joe reached over my shoulder, grabbing a red lipstick as he leaned in close and whispered, "This color would look gorgeous on you. I can't wait to see you wearing it." And then he placed the lipstick in my basket and walked away, leaving the store. I remained in the store for about 20 minutes after he left, afraid to leave and make the walk home, and after I mustered up the courage, I put the lipstick back, put away the basket, and called a friend to stay on the line until I got home. Now, I don't know if he followed me home or not, but I can say that after that day, the motion detector porch light started coming on at night, and I started hearing knocks at my bedroom window. Thankfully, I moved shortly after that, and I haven't seen Joe since. I live in a small city in central Michigan. There's a city park with a forest directly behind my house. For being at the edge of the city, it's actually a decently large forest too. You could say that the forest is split by a very thin clearing that cuts it in two. A small part that has the walking paths, and then a much bigger part with not very many paths at all. So one summer evening 3 years ago, out of boredom, 6 friends and I decided to go out to the bigger part and play hide and seek. Yes, I know, 15 to 18-year-old kids playing hide and seek. Anyway, I was the seeker and quickly found my friends Emily, Alice, and Brody, but the other 3, they went pretty deep into the woods. We decided to split off to look for them. Emily and I went one way, while Alice and Brody went another. Emily and I eventually split off ourselves, and I ran into Alice and Brody. We figured out that everyone else was lost in the woods, and so we decided to stay where we were and just wait. The whole thing lasted about 2.5 hours, I'd say. During that time, we stayed put and waited for everyone to find their way towards us. And this is when the weird stuff started to happen. Emily had called Alice several times and told us weird stuff was happening to her, but she wasn't able to say what it was due to her poor connection. A little while later, while it was pretty much dark out, we saw a white light about at 50 yards away from Alice. Brody and I, in the trees, we called out thinking it was a phone light and it was one of our friends. But we didn't get any response, and for several minutes it just kind of bobbed in and out of the trees and eventually just disappeared. We figure that it couldn't have been another person because, well, we didn't hear any footsteps or leaves rustling, and no one could have made it through the dark woods without a light. Immediately after this, Brody swears that he saw a face right next to him staring at him and then just disappear. But by this point, we're pretty freaked out, and later I went back out to the clearing by myself because we thought that Emily was there, but she wasn't. I also saw 4 or 5 small red orbs of light circling around a bush. They were not fireflies or lights from a deer cam or anything too. I checked several times. But I met up with Alice and Brody, and eventually Emily and everyone else found us, and we left the forest. While Emily was lost, she also had her own experiences. At one point, she heard loud, very heavy footsteps all around her, even though there were no animals. She also says that she saw what looked exactly like one of our friends, Max, on the trail ahead of her, yet he wasn't anywhere near her the whole time. She also heard what clearly sounded like a boy and a girl whispering behind her, yet no one was there. Over the past few years, I've had other experiences out in those woods, and at one time it was pitch black out. My friend and I saw 6 very large orbs of red light fly around us really fast and then just disappear. I've seen other large yellow lights flare up and then just go away and then flare up again like a lighter, except no one's there. Mind you, they were way too big to be fireflies, and I also heard a human-like moan right next to me once, and I just booked it back home after hearing that, and another time I heard the same heavy footsteps that Emily had heard all around me, but no person or animal was near. I don't want to say that it's for sure haunted, but I've definitely experienced things out there that are just not immediately explainable. Anyway, thanks for listening. So, I was raised by my single mum and was actually emotionally abused by her. My grandma and I were really close, and my grandma, brother and mum used to go to church together. But we stopped going shortly after an incident happened at the church where a girl fell back off of 15 chairs stacked. The youth wing of the church was doing some sort of a trust faith exercise. I remember this very clearly, that the 3 youth pastors put a video of them bungee jumping off of a bridge on a projector. They were making the case that Jesus is your lifeline and to trust in him like they had trusted the bungee cord. It's funny too, because I remember thinking to myself, Jesus didn't die for our sins for us to be negligent, right? Anyway, I had seen the exercise done with 5 chairs, but this was just certified stupidity. They kept stacking more and more chairs until she was nearly 7 feet off the ground, and they held her up on top of the chair stack. There was maybe 25 of us holding our arms out locked together, and she fell backwards, and I remember it like it was yesterday, a man's voice, which didn't sound like my own, or what God would sound like or whatever, that told me to just let go. I didn't purposely let go, and neither did the rest of the people there, but we all did let go, all of us, and we all let her almost break her neck. And I was confused. I mean, I didn't know what the heck was going on and why we were doing this in the first place. I'm actually going to ask my brother if he remembers a voice telling him to let go as well. In any case, I was 17 or 18 at the time. I had a girlfriend and she told me not to use her name, so I'll respect that. So this story starts off with my dad and I moving into a house that we rented, which had a tenant who lived underneath us in the basement suite. My dad was a long-haul trucker from the west coast of Canada to the east coast, so there were a lot of times where I was alone or with my girlfriend. My brother was living with my mum and my grandma, and my first experience in that house was when my dad was halfway to the east coast. He wouldn't be back for about another 5 to 10 days. Only my dad and I had a key as well. So the house was completely locked and all the windows were shut. Paris and I were drinking something and just watching Netflix on my laptop in the living room, and she wanted to go to bed, so we did. I made my laptop sleep but left the screen just open, and Paris left her sunglasses, which she had bought for $80 a couple of weeks before there. We got out of bed the next morning, and while I was making scrambled eggs, hash browns, and bacon, she walked into the living room and asked me if I'd moved her sunglasses. I said no, and I left what was on the stove and walked into the living room to find my laptop closed, the charger missing, and we searched everywhere for her sunglasses and my laptop cable, but we couldn't find them. She accused me of playing a mean-spirited prank on her, which I hadn't, and I suggested to her in a serious manner that there was something in this house that was trying to make us fight. Long story short, she verbally starts to call this thing out, basically saying, "I'm not scared of you." She did this for about 15 seconds or so and was walking in the rooms when the temperature just dropped massively. The room just felt really heavy and dark all of a sudden, and my sense of danger was just going into overdrive. I know that she felt more scared than me, and I contradicted everything she said while she was addressing this thing, and I apologized and told her to just please leave us alone and that she was a stupid person who doesn't understand what's going on. But she was shaking out of fear at this point, grabbed my hand and tried running while guiding my hand towards my bedroom. I pulled her back and said, "No, we walk, we don't show fear." And when we walked past my dad's room, a gust of wind and just a growl brushed past us. And at that point, we just left the house. She still denies all of this to this day, and she never actually found her glasses, and I did find my cable 3 months later behind my dad's toilet wrapped in a perfect figure 8 with a metal twist tie that I needed pliers to cut. There's a lot more to this story, but that'll do for now.